Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Tuesday, November the 4th, and welcome to our commentary. Well, obviously, there's elections today going on. There's some even elections here in Texas going on, amendments more than anything else. So, if you have a chance in Texas to get out to vote, there's like 17 amendments, and they're hard to follow. Honestly, they're hard to follow. So, what I did was I just kind of followed a combination of the newspaper endorsements, and I got several things from the Republican Party and kind of followed it that way because they're very difficult to follow. They're very difficult to follow, so many amendments at one time. I guess the good news is that I voted. The bad news is that when I went to vote, there weren't that many people. And from what I understand, not that many people have voted or plan to vote. So I don't know. That's something you got to realize, that these amendments impact you, whether you understand them or not. So I took the time to get to know them a little bit, and I would recommend that you do the same thing. The Dallas Morning News has a big write-up on it today. If you don't like to get that paper or don't read that paper, both parties were sending out a lot of different information about it. And so, study it a bit and try to make your own decision as best you can, but do vote. It's extremely important to vote in these elections. Well, I have a post over at the American Thinker today. Obviously, there's elections Tuesday, and we'll find out about this on Wednesday. We'll get into the New York City election on Thursday with our good friend Bill Katz, who lives in New York City or in New York area. But my post over at the American Thinker today about the election is this: I think the Democrats are in trouble no matter who wins New York City. If Mandani wins, he becomes the face of the party, and that's not good for the party. If Mandani loses, I think there's going to be a backlash against the establishment of the party, and you're going to see a bunch of primaries against, establishment Democrats. If you're a Democrat and you represent a district, you're probably going to get a primary. So that's what I think is going to happen. The Democrats are going to lose no matter what happens in this election in New York City. If Mandani wins, he's not going to be able to do anything that he says he can do. For one thing, he doesn't have the authority to do it. There's no way you can do any of this. Free rent, free buses. I mean, that's not something a mayor can do. So I foresee a lot of difficulties governing, and I foresee a lot of disenchanted voters who went out to vote for him because their rent is too high or the cost of food is too high. Yeah, I know it. New York has always been expensive. I mean, come on. It's always been a very expensive city. I remember traveling there years ago, and, you get a cheeseburger and it's like $20. I mean, everything is so much more expensive than it was in the rest of the country, but that's just the way it is. But this guy is promising all kinds of promises, I guess, crazy ideas of how he's going to fix the problem of affordability. He doesn't have any answers. He just has a bunch of promises. And I honestly don't see anything that he's saying that makes any sense. So we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed voters with their vote for Mandani because he can't do any of these things. I have a post coming out tomorrow about what's happening in Mexico. There was a mayor of a city, not a little town, about 300,000 people in the state of Michoacan, a fellow by the name of Carlos Mazo, who was executed in plain daylight. In fact, he was with his son when he was executed. 40 years old. He leaves behind a young widow and a couple of little children. Terrible situation. And it's become, I've never seen Mexico react so strongly to a shooting as they have with this mayor who was killed. I mean, the reaction has been very intense, especially directed at the president of Mexico, because she's under a lot of pressure. She's under a lot of pressure to continue the policies of her predecessor, López Obrador, because that's how she got elected. I mean, he elected her. I mean, let's just be honest about it. He set up the party structure that elected her. But she's under a lot of pressure to do something about this. I got a message from a friend of mine in Mexico basically asking me, what is Trump waiting for? And what he was suggesting, of course, is the idea of Trump taking out some of the cartels. I answered him, I don't really see that happening. And if we get involved in that way, it's going to be more with, honestly, in conjunction with the Mexican military. I don't think you're going to see unilateral action in Mexican territory. I don't see that. Now, you could see something similar to what is being done outside of Venezuela with some of the cartels. You could see attacks in some of the facilities. That could happen. But anytime you get engaged militarily in a conflict, you're going to have casualties. Because these plantations, or I mean, not these plantations, but these factories that make all this stuff, people work there who are just civilians who work there, people who work there. They're often in communities, so you're going to kill civilians anytime you act militarily. And that's not something I think the United States wants to do. So with respect to Venezuela is a little different because the cartels are very associated with Maduro. In Mexico, what we have to do is worry about the border. And this is what I told my friend. We need to worry about the border. We need to make sure the border is closed, and it's in pretty good shape right now. And that we're going to limit who comes in and doesn't come in. That's what we got to do. And focus on the border. That's honestly the only thing we can control. And yes, we can continue to go after some of these criminal elements here in the United States. But I am not crazy about, introducing American soldiers to Mexican territory. That's not something I think would be a good idea. I think in many ways would be very counterproductive. So that's what I told my Mexican friend, who is obviously very concerned about this violence. And the violence is really, really something. You've had, I don't know how many journalists who've been killed, and they're killed because they write something negative about the cartels. The mayors, this particular mayor who was killed, who so much controversy has been created, this man was a vocal critic of the government, saying, hey, you can't do this. You cannot continue to allow this. And he was very critical of the current government. And then he gets shot. So a lot of Mexicans are responding with protests and attacks on the administration down there. And that's fine. That's what they should do. But introducing American troops, you got to be very careful with that. You got to be very careful because you may end up creating a bigger problem than what you have. So again, worry about the border. Make sure the border is safe and secure, as it is right now, I think. And then deal with Mexico indirectly. Or you can support the Mexican army and provide training and all of that. But they're the ones that have to do it. They're the ones that have to fight the cartels, not the American military. I just feel strongly about that. You don't want to get yourself involved. And I feel the same way about Venezuela, too. I don't support having American troops running around Caracas chasing Maduro. That's not a good idea either. What we need to do is continue to put pressure on Maduro, economic, diplomatic pressure, to get him out. Because he's not the duly elected president of the country. He stole the election. And you're seeing more and more Latin American countries get on our side. And that's because Secretary Rubio has done a fantastic job, honestly, of organizing this Latin American group against Maduro. So continue to put pressure, and he'll eventually have to leave. But military troops, that's simply not a good idea. I just want to say a word about Vice President Cheney, who passed away. I guess he passed away Monday night in Wyoming with his family. I was always a fan of Vice President Cheney, of his career. I remember his wife. I forgot. I think it's Lynn Cheney. No, that's his daughter. I forgot her name, but she was a wonderful person. I remember she wrote books for children. So I think he was a wonderful man. And yes, I know he made some controversial decisions, but I think he always made those decisions thinking about the country. And whether it's Iraq or whatever, look, I supported the war in Iraq, and I continue to support the war in Iraq. We're better off because Saddam Hussein is not there. And that's just how I feel about it. Imagine having Saddam Hussein in power in Iraq right now. I may not be in love with the government of Iraq. It may not be a perfect democracy, but it's certainly a lot better than it was that region when you had Saddam Hussein, passing weapons to terrorists or invading countries or whatever. So I think Dick Cheney was a good man, a well-respected man, and rest in peace. And my condolences to his family for a great career. He was a patriot in every respect. I want to say happy number 70. Let's see, happy number 77. Number 77 to First Lady Laura Bush. She's 77 today. So First Lady Laura Bush, I assume, I saw something, a little video of President Bush and Mrs. Bush, either the Cowboys game or the SMU game, and she looked great. So Laura Bush, former First Lady of the United States and former First Lady of Texas, 77 today. And we do remember, go back in history, 1980 on this day. What were you doing on this day in 1980? Well, you were probably voting for then candidate for President Ronald Reagan, who won the election on this day in 1980. He defeated President Carter and won a pretty big victory, if you remember. Huge victory for defeating President Carter. And then, of course, he was reelected 4 years later in even bigger numbers. So we remember 1980 today. President Reagan, or candidate Ronald Reagan, well, at the time, I guess, was Governor Reagan, although he was not governor at that moment, but they used to call him Governor Reagan, who became President Reagan, or President-elect Reagan, on this day in 1980. So that was a happy moment. I remember that day. Happy moment when Ronald Reagan was elected president. So thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.